What it looks like. Just a second. Okay. So please do me a favor and raise your hand if you got this document, the Fat Loss Resistance Assessment Guide. I want to make sure that all of you guys have that. If you don't have it now, then you could always do it later. Totally up to you. Then make sure, I want you guys to make sure that you've done this exercise. Raise your hand if you've done the Fat Is Not Your Fault Fat Loss Resistance Assessment Guide. It's basically all the questionnaires. And so you go through all these questions and it adds up where you might be holding on to fat based on the things that are dysfunctioning in the body. Okay, cool. So a few of you did. And if there's any of you guys who have not done it yet, I sent out an email earlier this week, and then I also sent another email today for anybody who registered later on. So you can always come back and do this, because we're going to be able to make it through 10, not all day today, but we're going to be able to make it through about 5 things today. 10 of the top reasons that people hold on to fat. And if you're listening to the recording, then you can still do this document, because it's really important to figure out of all the 10 systems that we're going to go into, it's important to find out where your trigger is. So what thing is going on inside of you that is dysfunctional? Because the bottom line, what we're going to go into tonight in this 1-hour webinar, is that a lot of us are doing, and this is what I see in the forum, is that so many of us are doing their best. We're doing like a lot of work to get our dream body. But then we feel like it goes by the wayside because we're doing everything that we're told to do, or maybe we're restricting calories, or maybe we're exercising, 2 hours a day at the most, hopefully, or 30 minutes a day, maybe even 3 times a week. We've tried different diets. We've tried different programs. We've tried maybe fasting. We've tried eating nothing. There's so many different things that I've seen women try over the years. Like, I think I've been doing this now for almost on and off since I was 17, and now I'm now 35 years old. So I've seen women, I've seen all different genders, I've seen all different sexes and different people try different things. And so I really have seen what works and what doesn't work. And really what we talk about in the forum is that it's different for everybody. And so what might work for one person may be completely different for another person. So it's very individualized. So when you see someone say, oh, this worked for me, I would still kind of look, cautiously with one eye going, I wonder if that's going to work for me. You take it for a grain of salt. But I think the most important part where this gets really customized to you, and this is how I work with my clients. And, this is not, I'm in Orange County, California, and people pay $100 to $200 an hour to get consultations with someone like myself for this kind of work, because they really are hungry for customized advice. This is the kind of stuff you're not going to get in a book. This is the kind of stuff you're not going to get in a program. This is the kind of stuff that I'm going to empower you with tonight, so that you could figure out what is your roadblock that is going to be different from everybody else's roadblock that's holding you back from weight loss. And I'm not just talking about weight loss, right? Because I'm sure all of you guys are all in agreement that you would prefer to gain some muscle and not gain fat. So there's a difference, right? And a lot of women, I was a little bit of my background. If you guys read a little bit about me on the No Excuse Mom page, I was a bodybuilder for a little over 2 years. And when I was a bodybuilder, and this was like 3 years ago, I quit. When I was bodybuilding, I would work out about 2 hours a day. And I know that's crazy. 2 hours a day is insane. No one needs to work out that much unless they're training for the Olympics or for a bodybuilding program, which I'm not judging anybody, but that really sets us up for adrenal fatigue. And adrenal fatigue is something that we're going to talk about tonight. And that, do me a favor, raise your hand if you've heard of the term adrenal fatigue. Raise your hand on your little, on your computer software. And if you have a kid in your hand, I understand if you can't, but I just would like to hear how many of you guys are familiar with what it means to have fatigued or tired out, exhausted adrenals. Okay, so now I know how deep I need to go into this, because just only one of you guys has raised your hand. So I need to get really deep into this, because our adrenals are a gland that helps to cope with whatever stress that's happening in our lives, be it chemical from the outside, personal care products, be it foods that we're consuming that might not agree with our body. Maybe overtraining would be adrenal fatigue. Not getting enough sleep is adrenal fatigue. Having an argument with our spouse is adrenal fatigue. Not being happy where we're at with our life is adrenal fatigue. So anyway, going back to my story, I had some pretty severe adrenal exhaustion, but I was still training like 2 hours a day. And this is where, if we're exhausted, then going to the gym or really working hard, like a heart rate higher than like 130 or 140, that might actually be counterproductive for your fat loss goals. That might actually make us more fat. So one of the things I wanted to tell you guys now is that over the years, I've been playing soccer since I was 4. I started playing pro soccer when I was about 21. And then around 23, I started a business and I was still doing some nutrition and personal training on the side, still played soccer that whole time. And then when I was a bodybuilder, I restricted calories like crazy. I ate fat once a day and I ate protein like 6 times a day and carbohydrates, like the healthy ones, lots of broccoli, lots of asparagus. I ate a little bit of fish at nighttime and only 1 serving of fat per day. And so a lot of you might be thinking, well, that sounds really healthy. Brown rice, broccoli, lean turkey, lean chicken. That sounds pretty healthy. That's what everybody tells me to eat. And that could very well be the problem, is that might be what works for one person, but doesn't work for another. When I was bodybuilding, I was really, really trying hard. And I was probably spending about 3 to 4 hours a day to get that 10% body fat look. And under 15% is really not that healthy for females. So I'm now 15%. I work out less than 1 hour, 5 days a week, and I don't count calories. I don't really pay too much attention to what I eat because now I'm kind of on autopilot to know that for each meal, I should have a healthy fat, a healthy protein, and a healthy carbohydrate. And starchy carbohydrates for dinner are typically something that's going to add waste to our waistline because it doesn't get used for fuel. So I want to empower you guys with what I'm going to talk about tonight, because one of the first things that I learned when I became a diagnostic nutritionist, and what does diagnostic mean, is that diagnostic means that I look at labs to look at different hormones to see where women are at. And I was just on the phone earlier today with a doctor client of mine, and she's a pediatrician, and she has been working really hard to burn fat. She's been working out with the top trainers in the world here in Orange County, and she's still not getting where she needs to be. And so I looked at her diet and she's like, oh, I eat a little bit of fat here and there. So this is one of the bigger things, is to understand that the biggest reason that women are not able to lose fat is because we have hormonal imbalances. And typically it's not enough hormones. And guess what hormones are made of? Fat. So the whole low fat craze from like the 1980s and 1990s is out. Now we're talking about trans fats. Those are the more hazardous things. So we're going to talk primarily about hormones tonight and how eating more fat will actually help you burn more fat. I'm really interested to hear from you guys, and you can tell me on the chat room right here. I would love to hear from you. Also, if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat. I'm going to type a little test message so that just to make sure that you guys can all see. I would love to have you guys interacting in the chat room. Don't be shy. If there's any questions that you have, since you're muted right now, you could type your messages there and I'll comment on them or I'll integrate them into the slides that we created here. I have an assistant in New York who put these slides together for us. And I thought it was a really good idea today to talk about the 10 roadblocks that are standing in your weight loss. I should say fat loss. I'm not going to refer to it as weight loss anymore. I really don't like that term. I think fat loss is more important because the fat around our stomach, that's called visceral fat. And that's the fat that actually causes heart disease, insulin resistance, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and obesity. These are a lot of the issues where we store a bunch of toxins in that fat. So I'm not talking about losing weight today, so that you guys understand the difference. It's not about weight loss because we want to preserve muscle because that burns fat. What we want to do is we want to burn off the fat, keep the muscle, and keep the fire burning throughout the day. And for that, it's different for each person. So what is the roadblock for you? Because you may have been following different diets, yo-yo dieting all over the place. I want you to do me a favor and raise your hand right now if you've been a yo-yo dieter and you feel like I am frustrated because these things haven't worked for me, instead of I'm not working for it. Because you guys, many of you that I see on this forum, you're working really, really hard and almost to the point where you're stressed out. The programs are teaching you to be obsessive about calorie counting. They're teaching you to be obsessive about portion size and management, where I want you guys to feel more liberated and to really, truly understand that it's not just about what you eat. It's about what your body does with that food. And it's really just information. So before we get into this, think about your body like a computer, and what you put into your mouth, that's the software. So whatever your body does with the information, in other words, whatever you're typing into a keyboard or whatever software programs you have in your computer, those can all vary. You could always uninstall a software program, reinstall a new one. You can change the information all the time, but this body is what we want to make sure it's functioning. When your computer dies, you got to replace it with a new computer. When your body dies, well, that's a whole different story. We don't have another chance, do we? So we want to maintain this body, and we want to make sure that all the systems are running. In other words, the hardware. There are 11 systems in the body. And of course, one of them we're going to talk about today is your endocrine system. So your endocrine system is one of the hormone, one of many different things that has information. It releases information. And so the endocrine system is things like your thyroid gland, your adrenal gland, and your thyroid gland is the engine of your body. So that's a big one we're going to talk about today. I'm going to show you guys, and also on this document, it's a very empowering document to show you. If you look here, and do me a favor, Carmen, raise your hand if you can see this clearly, because one of the things I want to point out is the two things here, adrenal and thyroid. So make sure that you guys can see that. And this is, if you have adrenal or thyroid as one of the top scores when you did this, that's something that you're going to want to look into. Those are massive sources of stress, and those two are really big fat burners. So let's get into it. And Carmen, I didn't see you raise your hand, so you're either away from your computer, but can someone please raise your hand so that you guys can confirm you can still see my screen and that the adrenal and the thyroid is something that you can see. Okay, thanks, Carmen. All right, cool. So keep this handy the whole time, because as I'm going through these roadblocks, then you guys can look at your sheet and be like, oh, okay, well, gosh, Diane's talking to me here. So these are going to be customized and personalized to you based on what your scores were, right? All right, so let's get started. So these are what I've been seeing in my practice with all the women I've been working with, and I've been working with women of all ages, women who are just recovering from cancer, people that have ADHD, women who are doctors and still who feel like, gosh, I've been trained and I'm an MD. Why don't I understand these things? And so we all have different backgrounds and we all have a different body. We all respond differently to the information that we're feeding our body. So if I sat here and ate a big bowl of kale and maybe 4 ounces of really healthy turkey, and I mean really healthy being maybe you have a little bit of fat in there, because I'm not a big believer in lean everything. We do need fat, and I believe every single meal we need a healthy amount of fat, maybe like 15 grams or so of healthy fat for each meal, and that will help to keep your meals so that you last about 3 to 4 hours. We shouldn't be super hungry like every hour. If we do, you definitely have some kind of an insulin resistance issue. And that's something we're going to talk about too. Insulin is another hormone. So I've seen so many different women struggle with all different types of things in order to break free of the fat retention that they've been holding on to for years. And it's literally just been certain things, just tiny little tweaks. And the fat that they've been holding on to for maybe decades, within like 3 months, it's gone. And it's different for each person. So if you have like an extra 100 pounds of fat, then that's not going to happen that quickly. But for people who are kind of hanging on to that last 10, 15, 20 pounds, this is really going to empower you, because these are those last little things where your body's holding on to fat for some reason. And it's probably because it perceives stress. And in that case, it's trying to protect your visceral organs. Because if you think about it, somebody's chasing after you. This is totally old school stuff. But if somebody's chasing after you with a sword, if there's more fat, then the sword has to penetrate through all that fat before it gets to your organ, before that's at which point you die. So if you're constantly in a state of fight or flight, stress, your body's going to store fat naturally around those organs to protect them because it perceives stress. So we're going to get into that. And that's a hormone. I want to see if anybody can guess it in the chat, to see if anybody can guess which hormone I'm referring to. It was one of the things that we did test for on the survey. So I wrote an article for the San Clemente Journal for this quarter. It's a magazine down here in Orange County. And this was the article that I wrote about, were these, I condensed it into 5 roadblocks. So tonight it's webinar 1 of 2, and we're going to get into the top 5 tonight. So the first one we're going to get into, nobody's talking on the chat room. Are you guys being shy, or is it not working? Or I just can't see your comments. Carmen, do me a favor, if you can hear me, hon, type in the message box down there so I can make sure that the chat box room is working. And then that way I can answer any questions that you have during my little rant here, because I want this to be interactive. Okay, so, or if it's not Carmen, someone please type test in the chat section where it says type message here, just so I can make sure that the chat room is working, because I don't see anything right now. Okay. Yep. There we go. I've got 2 people who type it's working. Okay. Thanks, Julie. Sweet. So ladies, if you guys have any questions, feel free to stop me by asking any questions in the little chat room there, and I'll stop what I'm doing and answer them for you. And if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll unmute you so you can ask me any questions. Shelly, I see your hand up and you're unmuted. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to mute you. Okay, so everybody's muted now. If you guys have any questions, Shelly, still hand is up. So if anybody has any questions, keep your hand up. Shelly, did you have a question? Nope. Okay, so I'm going to go on. Okay, so the number one roadblock to fat loss, and I see this over and over and over and over in my practice. I'm just going to leave these like this now instead of for a full screen because I want to be able to see the chat room. The problem is that there's 5 hormones that are crucial for controlling fat, and that most of ours are out of whack. It's totally classic for females to be like, oh, it must be the hormones. Like, I must say that today I used that excuse myself because I was like, I must be getting my period. I have to be getting my period. Why am I so moody? And there's actually apps for that. There's one called My Days. It's a free app, and it allows you to keep track of your periods. And so, and also for ladies who are trying to get pregnant or not trying to get pregnant or just trying to keep track of your cycle, there's that app on My Days allows you to keep track of the periods that you've had, the cycles that you're on, when you might be fertile, because I don't myself use birth control because it destroyed my life. It really destroyed my hair, my face, my mood, my waistline. I was holding on to a lot of synthetic hormones and got copper toxicity. So if you guys, everybody reacts differently to birth control. I'm not a big birth control fan because of a lot of them are synthetic hormones and they tend to destroy our body. And that's what I see a lot in women is estrogen dominance. And especially like the NuvaRing, I see this a lot with a 5-year IUD. I see it a lot with the pill. So a lot of us are on hormones that are really destroying our moods and potentially our cycles. And a lot of us are on these pills because we at some point were prescribed them because we hope to regulate our cycle. And I, for 7 years, thought it was like the coolest thing in the world to not have a period because I had Depo-Provera shots ingested in me. But then I learned what the side effects of not having a period for 7 years were. And I pretty much, punched myself in the face for that one because I was like, I thought it was neat. I was like this really cool athlete that never had to wear a tampon. That's a bad idea. So anyway, if you hop on my YouTube channel, you can watch that video that I talk about my personal birth control experience, different birth control alternatives that I recommend. And I also talk about alternative options too for using tampons because a lot of those are genetically modified and they destroy the flora and hence the hormonal balance in our vagina. So that's one part is that how are our hormones so imbalanced? How it happened is that, and these are kind of more the causes, is that our hormones are disrupted because of, like I said, one of them is birth control. Another one of them is stress. So a lot of us are so stressed out these days. And there's 3 different types of hormones that are produced in what's called your adrenal glands. And those are your stress coping glands that sit on the top of your kidneys in the base of your spine, kind of like in your thoracic area. So if you ever have like a pain right here, or you feel like just a dull ache or shooting pains, or you just feel like at that point it's tight, it's probably very typical that you have what's called adrenal failure or fatigue. It's something that our brain tells us to release hormones from the adrenals. And they've recently done studies, how can we fix adrenal fatigue? It's not the adrenals' fault. It's our brain and being so overworked all day. Our brains never stop thinking. So the more that we're thinking, the more that we're going, the more we're fatiguing that hypothalamus and it can't communicate to the adrenals to release sex hormones in balance. And that's why we have a lot of infertility issues, amenorrhea, female cycles doing ups and downs, not having a 4 or 5 day cycle every month. We've got mood swings, we've got PCOS, we've got all kinds of issues with our hormones. And that's because our adrenals are super tired because the adrenals also release stress hormones called cortisol. And when we are stressed, that gets the priority. Cortisol gets released to help run from the tiger. In other words, cope with stress. And so our sex hormones get the back seat. And then our sleep hormones too, they get the back seat. So stress hormones get priority. Meanwhile, our body's going, I don't have time to make hormones to sleep. I don't have time to make sex hormones to have a sex drive or to have a great cycle. And I have a question here. I work at 3 a.m. with 5 kids. Hard to get much sleep. I average about 5 hours of sleep. Can that be due to my plateau? Yeah, for sure. Despite working out twice a day and eating healthier. Yeah, Lamata, that's what I see a lot in women. And in fact, there is a study. You guys can share this with your significant others, if you're married or if you have a husband or boyfriend or significant other or even brother or dad. But there was a big study that was done on this, and my boyfriend does work with guys, and this big study that they did stated that if men get less than 6.5 hours of sleep for a 6 week time period, they lose the equivalent of 15 years worth of testosterone. So it's really important. It's critical to sleep. I'm leading another group. It's called Rebel Health Tribe, and I'm leading people through a 6 week program now so they can be empowered on how to, do a lot of the things we're talking about tonight, but on a do-it-yourself version with a whole bunch of attachments and a whole bunch of different diet recommendations. And one of the very first things we talk about is stress and stress management, stress reduction. And if anybody were to ask me anything about one of the biggest roadblocks to weight loss or to most of their goals in life, it is that we don't get enough sleep. And so it is difficult. I understand you guys have kids, and we have a lot of moms who are very, very busy with kids, but this is something that we as Americans are not prioritizing now. And it just has become this trend that we work like 10 hours a day now, and we have time with the kids. When do we ever get time for ourselves? So the time for sleep has been shrinking and shrinking. I'm like, can we please add like 2 extra hours to the day somehow? Can we do that? Like the Incans did it a long time ago. Why can't we do it like 27-hour days? Does that sound cool? So yeah, I definitely think so, Lamata. That is one of the hormones that is part of this 5 hormone imbalance. If you have low melatonin, and that's your sleep hormone, then your body isn't going to rest. And 95% of fat burning happens while we rest, while we sleep. So that's a pretty big one. I mean, you could be working out as much as you say that you are. You could be eating the healthiest foods in the world. But if your body can't recover while it's sleeping, you're going to wake up really tired. You're going to have really high levels of cortisol throughout the day that eventually reduce. And when you have high cortisol like that, your body is just cued all day long. Store more fat, store more fat, store more fat, because you're dragging through the day. And that's when we're grabbing for, buying time with caffeine, with coffee, with stimulants. B vitamins are a healthier way to do that. But we're literally borrowing from our future to give us more energy right now, but then it crashes the adrenals at some point. And this is why we see a lot of women these days having strokes at such young ages, because our adrenals just can't keep up. So if you can work your way up, sweetie, even if it's 6 hours, just try to work your way up 5, 6, even if you just get 7. I say 7 to 9 is great. I feel a huge difference when I get 8 hours versus 7 hours, 7 hours versus 7.5. So do your best. Really make it a priority to get to sleep in time so you can get some of the buy-in from some of your significant other or whomever it is in your family, so you have some time relief, because that really is a big deal. That's one very important hormone. So I'm glad that you asked that question. Anybody else who has sleep issues on here, you guys can also ask questions, because I'm watching over here for the questions. So it will also, what that will do, Lamata, is that will also slow your metabolic rate during the day, because what it will do is it increases cortisol, and that's the fat storing hormone. And when cortisol is released, it also releases blood sugar from the liver and from the muscle. And when our sugar levels are high, because our body needs energy, so cortisol is saying, okay, release some sugar from all the storages in the body, and then you get sugar in the body. That's basically your body's way of making caffeine internally to give you energy. And when that starts to happen, then you start to develop what's called insulin resistance. Please, I want you guys to comment here if you have any issue with insulin resistance. About half of America now is getting to the point that we're having what's called insulin resistance. What that means is when we're eating carbohydrates need an insulin. That's basically, it's like the guest. It's like insulin is the guest, and sugar is the special guest. So basically, the escort is insulin and the guest is sugar. So insulin is escorting sugar into the cells so the cells can use it for energy. That's one of our main sources of fuel, right? And the brain is 75% fat. That's why we need fat, but we also need some degree of glucose that's broken down from carbohydrates in order to have readily available energy. It's the body's preferred source of energy. but fat can be converted to glucose, so too can protein. So there's this whole concept that how much carbohydrates do we really need? And most of the argument today now is most people in the nutrition science are saying that in the paleo diet and just in, I don't even like the word diet, but just people eating real food, we don't need all these starchy carbohydrates. A lot of greens are really helpful and beneficial, and they will help to us to go regularly. The other thing I posted on the forum the other day is I asked people how often they pooped. And poop is such a big deal. And I love talking about poop because we need to be going like 2 times a day in order to get the waste out of our body. But if we're not going every single day, then all that waste that's sitting here in your colon ready to leave, all of the toxins are just reabsorbing back into your body, into your bloodstream. And one of the 10 roadblocks is toxicity. So the more toxic we are, the more our body's going to store these toxins in the fat cells, and we're just going to expand. That's why I don't call it your waist, W-A-I-S-T. I call it your waistline, W-A-S-T. So if we're toxic and if we're not able to go like twice a day, like number 2, and it's pleasant and not super laborious, then we're not getting the toxins out of the body, and the toxins have to be stored in fat. One of the things that affects motility, in other words, how much you go to the bathroom, is our hormones. Thyroid is part of it. We're going to get to thyroid next. But this imbalance of all of the sex, sleep hormones is, and I already just talked about the roller coaster of blood sugar levels, that also inflames your gut. And that is another thing that will cause constipation. And so a lot of people today, I hear so many women, they're like, oh, I go to the bathroom like every other day. And I have quite a few clients now who go like once a week. One of my clients, her dad just got through chemo and got through cancer. I'm working with her dad, and she's like, I haven't gone to the bathroom for a week. So I'm now helping her because she went through a lot of stress helping her dad with chemo. So we really need to be going a lot more often. I myself, every single one of the things I've struggled through, I want to share with you guys because I want you to know that I'm human. I've gone through this before. And these are a lot of the roadblocks that I pushed through that opened everything up where I went, holy crap, it's that easy. Like, I don't mean to simplify it, but it really is that easy. A healthy body won't hold on to fat the way that much of America does. So how do we get healthier? Let's talk about some of the other roadblocks. So the other things, trouble sleeping, managing hunger cues, you're going to be super hungry. You're going to have crazy food cravings if your body can't process food appropriately and if it's stressed out. So these are some of the things I used to have issues with. I had a really big parasite overload, and that's something that a lot of people think, oh, I have to travel abroad to have parasites. I actually had a lot of them, and I had to get rid of a lot of them. I see this in a lot of my clients, especially who have IBS or autoimmune conditions, which I've totally helped them reverse all the symptoms of and gone into just maintenance mode. But it's possible. So a lot of you women on the forum are saying, oh gosh, I didn't know that I could actually reverse some of these things. I didn't know that I could get rid of some of these conditions that I have. I don't have to own this. And the truth is, no, you don't have to. You just have to turn the lights on in your body, so to speak, so that things start to function better and you have restoration in the body and it's more balanced. So things will literally start melting once your body is restored. So we want to restore your levels of thyroid hormone, leptin hormone, insulin hormone, cortisol, and melatonin. I talked about thyroid. We're going to talk about that next. Leptin is a hormone that tells us to leave it. And so there's ghrelin and leptin. They're released by fat cells. You guys may have heard of leptin before, but leptin says, leave it, stop eating, don't eat anymore. So that's what leptin means. I said L stands for leave it. But a lot of us don't have that switch. So our switch to keep eating just stays on. It doesn't stop. So a big thing that I recommend to people, in order for leptin to even function better and in order for our gut to actually work, to take time to digest, is slow down your eating. Because so many people shovel food into their mouth and they're in a hurry and they haven't even chewed their food. They're just basically swallowing food whole. And then the body has to work, the system has to work a lot harder to digest the food in our stomach. I see this a lot in my clients' test results, that they aren't digesting fats, proteins, carbohydrates well, and it literally will rot in their gut and bacteria feed off of it and cause gas and constipation, all sorts of other negative symptoms, cancer. If you have candida in the gut and you get rid of it, and this is very common, candida is a fungus that I see in a lot of people, including one of the doctor patients I'm working with now. If we have candida in our gut, and which is a fungus. And we get that from things like, overuse of antibiotics, overuse of birth control pills, consuming a lot of gluten, wheat, breads, dairy, pasta. Those are things that can inspire candida. And when we have that in our stomach, if you get rid of it, you slash your odds of getting gastrointestinal cancer by 75%. So cancer is really caused by all these toxins in the body and just a misfunction, a dysfunction somewhere in the body. So let's move into, oh, hey, Deepshika, did I say that right? You have Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. So do I, sister. Can changing my diet help since medications do not control my thyroid levels well? Well, yes. Okay, let's move into that and let's talk about the thyroid. Um, I looked at this, I talked about this earlier, and I'm really glad that you asked that because I want you to know, oh, good, I pronounced your name right. I want you to know that this is something that I suffered from when I was 17 years old. I knew better. I was like, why are my hands and feet always cold? And why am I shivering all the time? And I had stuff going on with my skin. I had a lot of acne. I really, as a kid, had a lot of insecurities. I didn't feel pretty ever. I just wanted to cover it all up. And the doctors just kept sending me away with these clean bills of health. They ran my thyroid panels, which were typically like, TSH, T4, T3. Deepshika, that you have Hashimoto's thyroiditis because they tested you and they probably looked for what's called TPO, and that's an antibody marker. This is what pretty much 95% of doctors today that are covered through insurance don't look at. They don't look at whether or not our body's attacking itself. They look at only when there's a reason for drugs. And so I was sent away for 7 years every year with your thyroid's fine, your thyroid's fine. And I'm like, no, it's not. I get UTIs all the time. My skin's horrible. I've done the research. There's something wrong with my thyroid. And after 7 years, I just kind of gave up and went, well, I guess I'm supposed to, maybe I just am this way. I don't want you guys to feel that way. If you feel a symptom that feels negative, that just doesn't feel right, that causes you any discomfort, that is your body's way of saying, please help me. And so look into it. Feel free to email me because I know a lot about this stuff and I know what a symptom is. So many of us tend to just assume that we feel something and, oh, it's just probably the way my body is. So it really is important for you to be keenly aware of what a symptom is. And this document that I sent to you really helps you to go through. So all of these things, the questions that are on here, each one of these questions are very specific symptoms. So if you feel these are symptoms related to each one of the 10 roadblocks to your fat loss. And so we know where to go to open up the gate so the fat can leave, right? So the answer I'm going to get to you in a minute, Deepshika, because I'm going to get to the thyroid. Your hormones basically are just information and they determine how well you respond to exercise and diet. Because our thyroids are low functioning, that's what hypo means, is that it's low functioning, it's slower. And that just basically means a slower engine. It's almost like our thyroid just smoked weed. I've never used that analogy before, but it's almost like our thyroid just like lazy. It's like on the couch. It's like, nah, I'm not going to take part in the fat loss today. I'm just going to chill here on the couch and watch reruns and eat potato chips. So you could be doing as much exercise. Same question as what Lamata asked, without sleep, without a well-functioning thyroid. Those are two massive roadblocks to fat loss. So yes, there are things that you can do to improve your thyroid. And this is something I'm going to share today because 20% of Americans, mainly women, are having issues with their thyroid, which means metabolism is slowing. So you could be eating super healthy, but your metabolism is your engine. That's what burns the fat. Once I found out I had a thyroid issue and that my body was attacking itself, and I was able to remove the foods that I investigated that were causing more inflammation in my body and gave it what it needed and gave it a natural, it's called armor. That's something you might want to look into and talk to your endocrinologist about. I took natural hormones for thyroid replacement instead of synthetic hormones, aka drugs that are made in a lab, like prescriptions. I started supporting my thyroid and did a gallbladder flush. And that's the month that I lost 8 pounds. And I was like, this is the 8 pounds I've been looking to lose for like 15 years. And it went away and I just went, oh my God, I'm here. Like, look at my abs. I didn't know I had these guys. I only knew I had them when I took some pretty serious fat burners. when I was bodybuilding, and I was so not healthy, and I was super tired, and I had adrenal fatigue. Now you guys know some of these terms, and you could talk adequately and intelligent with your doctors. If your doctors look at you like you're crazy and they go TPO, adrenal fatigue, and they poo-poo you, just come talk to me, because a lot of the times that's why I work with a lot of people. They've been, working with their doctors for years and they still haven't gotten anywhere, but maybe a few drugs and maybe just gained some more fat. So this is why I think it's so important to understand thyroid, because I see this so often dysfunctioning, and TPO is a very important marker. And that's just basically your body's attacking itself, because I see autoimmunity in so many of our clients and patients. And 1 and 2 of us, I mentioned this before, are borderline diabetic from insulin resistance. 1 out of 2 of us. If we have insulin resistance and if we're eating basically carbohydrates, that's what our body wants to use for fuel. And if it can't get into the cells, here's the door, insulin's knocking, going, can I put this sugar in the cell so you could use it for energy? The cell's like, nah, man, you cried wolf too much. AKA you're eating too much sugar or too many carbohydrates, or you're not eating frequently enough. We got to eat like 3 times a day at least. I do like what's called intermittent fasting, every so often doing 15-hour fasts, not eating like after 6, 7 o'clock at night, and then eating lunch the next day. But that's only if you don't have, pretty high adrenal fatigue. So it works for some people, it doesn't work for others. But for those who don't have big adrenal issues, in other words, you're not tired all the time, you could try intermittent fasting. But otherwise, don't skip your breakfast, because that really sends your cortisol on this roller coaster and you're up and down throughout the day. That destroys your insulin tolerance. And so you have insulin resistance, AKA diabetes, and all the carbohydrates you eat go straight to your waistline and all of your other problem areas. So that's another important hormone we're going to talk about. I see elevated cortisol levels in pretty much every single person that I work with. And so that's really important. That's why I'm bringing this up. I went through this already. So basically, the problem is high amounts of stress lead to elevated levels of cortisol in our adrenal glands, and that impacts our sex drive, metabolism, energy, and fat burning abilities. And they did a big study recently with Johns Hopkins University. They had people meditate for about 30 minutes a day. And what they found with these people who are meditating is that their stress levels went so down such that it was the equivalent of taking an antidepressant pill. And so we really need to, as a society, slow down, go inside. And I don't mean slow down like your thyroid, because we want that to speed up, but that's typically slowed down because it's attacking itself, and hypothyroid is very common. So I mean, just slow down our lives, take more deep breaths through the day. I have a video that I on my YouTube channel that talks about how to do alternate nostril breathing, using your belly for breathing instead of your shoulders like this, because that definitely will exhaust your adrenals and make everything feel tired and sore. And then you're going to be grabbing for Tylenol, which then clogs your liver. And if your liver's clogged, then you can't get fat out of the body. So you can see now how it's not just one thing. It's not your fault. If you're eating healthy and you're reasonably exercising, it's not your fault that these systems are failing. We really need to revitalize them. So we are a system of systems. It's not just when you see a specialist, oh, I'm a specialist in thyroid, I'm an endocrinologist. Well, if you're just looking at thyroid, but not looking at the other systems of the body that might not be working, we could prop your thyroid up all day long, but it's kind of like having one star player on a soccer team. You have one good player and 10 players that suck. Well, that's not a very good team, is it? So you want to get as many players on the team as highly skilled as you can. So be a recruiter for your systems, recruit the best players, AKA the systems of the body, restore health, and maximize output so that you can start burning fat more effectively. How do I do gallbladder flush? You know what, Lamata, I think I'm going to send this information out this time because I talked about it last time. That's something that I do have to caution, that since I'm a doctor, even though I have a lot of clients and patients and yoga students of mine who do this, and it clears up so many of their symptoms, but you want to make sure that you don't have large stones that are blocking the gallbladder. I didn't myself check that because I knew I was fine. But there are very rare occasions where when you're passing stones, and that's a lot of congestion, and that basically unlocks the ability to release bile salts to break down fats. So if you're eating really healthy fats, but you have a very congested gallbladder, then that fat's not getting broken down. And so that's again where if that system is faulty, then you could eat the healthiest fats in the world, but you can't manufacture hormones without first breaking down those fats. So that's a really big one. So I'll email that out to you, ladies, but it's simple. It's in drinking. I know it sounds crazy, but half a cup of olive oil or coconut oil before you go to bed, with about a half a cup of you can take a gallbladder. You can take a grapefruit, or you can do this with lemon juice, half a cup of lemon juice. And then you would add either, I know this sounds really crazy, but half cup of Coca-Cola, because it has phosphoric acid in it. Phosphoric acid just basically breaks down the stones that have calcified in the body. And really what cancer is, breast cancer, is a lot of calcification in the breasts. So taking calcium supplements, not a good idea for pretty much every single person. And I hear that a lot. Oh, really? I'm not supposed to take calcium supplements? But this is where I say, if you see it on TV and it's advertised on TV, it's probably someone who just stands to make a lot of money off of you, and it's not the best thing for you. So there's a lot of like Centrum Completes and all that stuff. If you see it on TV, it's probably not the best thing. So those three things before you get about a half a cup of Coca-Cola or Pepsi, because it has phosphoric acid. If you would like to use phosphoric acid instead, email me if you don't really want to drink soda. The soda does make it taste a little bit better because it's hard to stomach a half cup of oil. So you basically eat apples all day long, drink some apple juice. You'll want to have some Epsom salts at the 8 o'clock drink, 8 o'clock p.m. You have like a tablespoon of Epsom salts and 8 ounces of apple juice. You drink that. And then at 10 o'clock, you have the half cup of oil, olive oil, lemon juice, or grapefruit juice, and then the half cup of soda. You drink that, you immediately lay on your right side and bring your knee up to your chest. That's where your gallbladder is. So I see a lot of people, and I hear of a lot of people who have these pains right here, and they're like, oh, I have heartburn. And you really need to palpate. That means feel. Palpate underneath your sternum. So if you guys have free hands right now, do this with me. Your sternum is where your rib cage meets up here into a V. So you want to dig in here and then dig over to the right. That's where your gallbladder and your liver is. And my dad had to remove his gallbladder. So I'm thinking, gosh, genetically, I might be more susceptible to gallbladder removal. And they're removing gallbladders like they're giving out candy at Halloween these days. It's a very important organ though. So let's protect it. So if you're feeling pain here when you palpate and you push on it, you're probably a good candidate for this gallbladder flush. And when I did that, I saw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stones come out of me with a bunch of other toxic waste. Just gotta warn you guys, it doesn't smell very good when it comes out. So just to warn you, I'm totally truthful about all this stuff. But because hormone imbalances and disturbances are the key roadblock I see in my practice for women who can't lose weight, the gallbladder flush is definitely something I hear people just giving me tons and tons of amazing testimonials. I have one client who has been suffering from congestion, like head congestion, and most people will grab for some kind of anti-allergy relief over the counter that really does damage to our liver because it's synthetic. And liver's congested, you can't get rid of waste effectively, and then you'll see it in your waistline, right? So a lot of people want to grab for a Allegra or something over the counter. He did a gallbladder flush, and he said, I saw him like 2 weeks later, and I was like, whoa, dude, where'd your neck go? And he lost tons of weight. Like all the waste came out. He said, I have never felt this clear in my head my whole life. And he just did one. So this is really, really ancient Chinese medicine that's been around for thousands of years, and that is just now making a comeback because the drugs aren't working as well. So these are always your guys' choice to do. I'm not telling you, I can't advise you. I'm not your doctor. If you were working with me one-on-one, I could be a lot more customized with this, because you do want to make sure that when you do a gallbladder flush, that you're having regular poops every day, like 1 to 2 times a day, because you want an exit strategy for all this waste to get out, right? So there's a very appropriate order. I always say, make sure you prop the adrenals, make sure you feel a lot more energy, and that your body has the energy to effectively flush that stuff out of the systems. Because we have 11 systems of the body working, you don't want a really master one like the adrenals, who governs our energy levels. You don't want that to be flopped and then have inflammation over here and go, hey body, I know you're really tired, but can we get rid of this waste? Your body's like, I'm super tired. I can't really work on detox right now. That's one of the reasons I see so many women do detoxes and then they just gain the fat back again. Because they do detoxes, they might lose some stuff, but then they actually haven't repaired the organs that support the constant removal of waste. I'm huge on detox, and I've been leading group detoxes for 5 years because I think it's so important, but it's also important to have the organs in the right place so that you can remove the toxins out of the body. So I hope that makes sense, Lamata. I'll make sure I get you guys that document. Okay, so stress is a big thing. We talked about that, different areas, sources of stress. I talked about this in the last webinar. Chemical exposure stress is big also. So a lot of us are using aluminum in our armpits and parabens and deodorants and things like that. They're finding parabens in breast cancer tissue than any other chemicals that they're finding. So parabens and aluminum in our deodorants, also things like mercury, if you have silver fillings in your teeth, that kind of chemical exposure we'll talk about later. But these are all the sources of stress that will add to the body and increase cortisol release, and then thereby flopping the adrenals and making you feel tired. So we really want to make sure if the cortisol stays flush throughout the day. And what do I mean by that? I'll show you a couple test results next so that you can actually see what that means. So the negative effects of cortisol, and this is your stress hormone, is it decreases liver function. So hormones circulate too long in the body. So I see a lot of estrogen dominance in my female clients. And sometimes all it takes is flushing the liver with something called Dimpro. And it's a really cheap herb. If you guys want to try it, just let me know. I'll get you guys a discount. Just email me and I'll send over the information. Jaro has it. There's a couple other companies. I'm not here to sell supplements, but these are really big things that I see women do that help to restore function in their liver. And that's critical because the liver is basically the head honcho to get toxic waste out of the body. It increases something that's called leaky gut syndrome. And leaky gut is basically means that the lining of our small intestine should be like solid. It should be like that. And small intestine absorbs all the nutrients from the good foods that we're eating. So if we have a leaky small intestine, foods are leaking from the small intestine where there should be no holes in the lining into the bloodstream. And then all of a sudden your body goes into this attack and it surfaces as pain, as fatigue, as autoimmunity, as Hashimoto's, Dipshika, like you mentioned, as multiple sclerosis, all different kinds of autoimmune conditions and pain, rheumatoid arthritis. I have been working with a client right now. She was in pain her whole life since college. I played soccer with her. And I worked with her on her autoimmune condition, and I worked with her diet and fixing her gut. And she said over the last 6 months that we've been working, she has felt zero pain in the last month, and she has not felt this good since we played soccer in college together. So that's been 15 years. And we basically, quote unquote, reversed her rheumatoid arthritis. And now we're working on getting her pregnant, because when our body is under attack like that, we don't want to have a baby because our body will start attacking the baby. So this is really critical. And this is why I work with a lot of women on fertility and helping them get pregnant and helping the baby stay healthy too. Because all of these hormones govern the safety of the baby. And the more leaky our gut is, the more toxins that are going to go into the womb at that time. So we want to make sure that the gut is solid. Also important for you guys to understand, every single person who has an autoimmune condition has a leaky gut. And people who are having a hard time losing weight also typically have a very, very leaky gut. And what that means is, like I said, it's just food leaks into the bloodstream and our body starts mounting an attack and we become inflamed. And that could surface as water retention and water weight. It could also surface as fat. And it could also surface as, some extra water weight being held around our face. So I know when I got my thyroid under control, my face always looked so puffy and I was really insecure. Like in my face, when I smiled, my cheeks were like round. And I was literally the point where when I was a fitness model, I was photoshopping my cheeks because I was like, my face looks so puffy. I was sad. I was like, how come I can't get my cheeks under control? Like everything else looks pretty trim. But then once I got my thyroid under control, I noticed that in the attack down, I started noticing people, they were saying, oh, you look really lean. And my waistline got really small. And I was like, well, that was just it. I fixed my thyroid, I fixed my leaky gut, and I supported my adrenals. And I took all of the offenders out of my diet. And then I did that gallbladder flush. So I want you guys to feel empowered. And if you can, work on one system at a time, because tonight we're talking about mostly hormones. So we could also talk about how to know if you have hormonal imbalances, because these are the things that doctors kind of go, what? No, that's not something we're going to test. They don't really believe in this stuff. But this is where I see people getting off of drugs and really restoring their health for the long term and keeping the fat off, because all we're doing is turning the lights on, right? It also increases insomnia. So you asked about that too, Lamata. It lowers metabolism, something also that the thyroid hormone does if it's in hypo mode. It also affects our ability to read hunger signals and identify when you're full, so you wind up overeating. So if our cortisol is high all the time, in other words, if we're stressed all the time, our brain is receiving text messages from cortisol saying, eat more sugar, eat more sugar, eat more sugar. And then guess what? You're going to eat crap. Like, 24/7. And sometimes I have people waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning because their cortisol is so high, and their melatonin, their sleep hormone, isn't high enough. And cortisol wakes them up and says, blood sugar issues. That's borderline diabetic. And it's also a sign that your liver is super congested. We should sleep for 7 solid hours without waking up at the middle of the night, because again, that's when fat burning happens. So the thyroid is responsible for the body's metabolic rate. The fat burning depends on it, but yours isn't working properly. If it's not working properly, you might feel negative emotions in your mood, which is something I suffer from, digestion issues. I used to have like a 3-month pregnant looking belly because I had something called small intestine bacterial overgrowth, something also very common. I see a lot of women today. They're like, everything else looks great, but I look pregnant and I'm puffy all the time. And I'm like, well, you might have small intestine bacterial overgrowth. There's ways to test that, and then there's ways to get rid of it as well. So if your thyroid isn't working functioning well, it can't get some of that waste out of the body because everything's slowed down. So digestion slows down, motility slows down, the amount you go to the bathroom slows down, so there's less waste leaving the body. I hope that all makes sense. Also, your immune system will crash, and so you find yourself being sick quite often, and then your energy level is low too. So how it happened is that if we're eating a lot of foods, like gluten is one of the things that anybody who has a thyroid issue, like I talked about, gluten is just one of those things that will continue the attack. Gluten, dairy, we want to pull those out. Those are also things that contribute to body inflammation in general. Also, eating organic, cleaner foods is something that slows down the hormonal imbalance issues. And then, of course, how to fix it. You can either talk to your doctor, talk to me about testing, but accurate testing is really hard to find because, like she kind of talked about, TPO is something they don't find is very valuable. Whereas I want to know if your body's attacking itself, because if it is, you're not losing any fat. It's going to be an uphill battle unless you have a parasite in you, in which case your parasite keeps you skinny because it eats all your food. But that's a whole separate issue. Number 4, actually, I'm going to stop here because the rest of it is toxins. But I did want to show you guys a couple visuals, not this one because that's a tiger, but I did want to show you guys a couple visuals on how to identify some of these things. Let me open this up over here. Okay, so the visuals that I would like you guys to see, just one second. Where did they go? Oh, here it is. Sorry about that. Okay, so let me open up all of these. Okay, so very important to understand, and I'll get over these ones next, that the 7 dwarves of thyroid disease, these are things that you'll feel. If you have, common things to look out for that you also saw on your sheet: sleepy, pudgy, cranky, icky, puffy, draggy, and frazzly. Some of these symptoms can also look very similar to other conditions. And so if you look at next, the adrenal fatigue symptoms, very similar. Symptoms of, this is what I see, fatigue, low cortisol levels as opposed to high levels. Typically, people won't come to me when they're in this stage. They'll typically come to me when they crash, not when they're having the wired and tired feeling, but they'll come to me when they have adrenal flop, which means that they feel like they just can't get out of bed. Oops. They feel like they are really, really, gaining weight. They're anxious, irritable, lots of bone and muscle loss. So you could be working out really hard, but your body is not building muscle at this point, even with the best exercise programs in the world. You have, at this point, remember, adrenal fatigue is imbalanced sex, sleep, and stress hormones. And so fatigue is going to be one very common because you may have difficulty sleeping because your melatonin is your sleep hormone, and that might be low. Sugar and salt cravings are very normal. I used to have crazy sugar cravings, and now I have them somewhat under control. I still love chocolate before I go to bed because, hey, chocolate has magnesium in it, okay? And then sex drive, that was something that for a long time I was like, dude, where'd my mojo go? It was horrible. I used to have a great sex drive. And then for like a few months, I was really depressed because I was like, if I lost my sex drive, I don't really have much left. That's not the only thing I meant, but like I was also having other issues. Like I couldn't build muscle at the gym and my mind was going crazy. I was nearly bipolar. So these are some of the symptoms of adrenal fatigue. The causes, like I talked about earlier, are all of these things: prescription and non-prescription drugs, caffeine, the things that we're doing to replace our adrenaline, and think of adrenals like adrenaline that helps you, with energy. All these things, when you move, someone passes away, you get married, you get divorced, negative attitudes and beliefs, that's something that's typically, our lifelong work, right? chronic and acute infections, unemployment, financial pressures, fear. I see this so commonly, fear and emotional stress. But then, of course, beside the emotional, there's sugar, white flour, processed foods, allergies that stem from leaky gut. So you can see how these things are all very related. Too much or too little exercise. I see a lot of people torturing themselves at the gym now because they're like, I can't burn fat. I must not be working out hard enough. No, wrong. I am actually working out, like I said, much less than I ever have my entire life. And I weigh the less. I weigh the same amount I did in high school. I'm 35 now. So I want you guys to find the transition that I found where this is not, doesn't take this much effort. Of course, eating real food is a big part of it. You know, not eating processed food. It's not just about counting calories. It's about the density and the quality of our foods. And ideally eating greens, 3 times a day would be great. And like I said, having healthy fats in every meal. I just revised the thing I promised in the last webinar, which is the recipe book that I put together for you guys. It's 1 week worth of meal plans. And it's also how to learn how to build a plate for your healthy metabolism so you burn more fat. You're going to all get that, but I had to have some guy in India format it so it looked prettier, and it's taken a lot longer than I thought. So I'll have that out to you guys probably by the end of the week so you guys can read more about that and implement it, because I want your metabolism to be revving up like a Ferrari instead of like, a 1999 Honda. Sorry if you drive 1999 Hondas. You know what I mean. Okay, so this is also something I see this, and one of the test results I ran on one of my clients this week. She had really high triglycerides. This is something that you guys could even look at your most recent blood results and see what it looks like. She had really high triglycerides. In medical model, they'll say less than 200. I say if you're getting up to this amount here, if you're above 119, you are either pre-diabetic or diabetic. And if you are at that point, pre-diabetic or diabetic, all of the sugar that you're eating can't get into the cells. So where does it get stored? Do you guys remember? Say it in the answer. Where it is, if insulin can't bring glucose into cells, where does it get stored? See if anybody can remember what I said as I take a drink of my not favorite coconut water. That's all I had left though. So no one's guessing it. If you eat sugar or glucose or carbohydrates of any kind and it can't get into the cells for fuel, it'll get stored in fat. And so when you have high triglycerides, like this woman did, pretty much the carbohydrates she's eating just gets straight stored as fat. This is where you would be following conventional wisdom that you should eat so much carbs a day, but it's making you fatter. It shouldn't. Your carbohydrates should be able to get into the cells to give you energy so that you don't feel so tired. But this is when it's backfiring, especially if you have fatigue 1 to 2 hours after your meal. Okay, last couple things I wanted to get into. Adrenal fatigue, and then I'll get into the thyroid part, and then the last thing we'll look at is sex hormones. But basically, if you have chronic fatigue and adrenal exhaustion, you want to nourish the adrenals, and there's a lot of things called adaptogens, and these are supplements I recommend to pretty much everybody as a staple for the rest of our lives, because there is not really anyone that I know that is without stress in their lives. And I don't care who you are, but it's really not just the amount of stress, it's how we're responding to it. Then there's chemical exposure to stress, what we're eating is stress, our body is inhaling stress, we're not getting enough sleep is stress, we have kids, that's stress. It's good stress. It could be you stress, which is great stress, like getting married. But we have so much stress today and we're being asked to do so much. We're asking our body, so many demands, extra demands in the body, that we really need to nourish our adrenals so that we can cope with the other demands of our lives. Like exercise, that's good stress, but then we have to recover from it. And I hear a lot of people saying, oh, I'm really sore all the time after my workout. Well, it's because your body's not recovering very well, because your adrenals are probably shot. So you want to remove stress, or at least reduce stress, or how you handle the stress, and nourish your adrenals and remove the sources of stress from the body so you know which things are your stressors. If you guys have any questions about adaptogens and how to get them, I can get you guys a discount on that too. Again, I'm not pushing supplements, but these are things that help a lot of my clients with their energy levels much better than caffeine, which actually will inspire things like metabolic syndrome, aka diabetes, and cause estrogen dominance and hence waist, a larger waistline. So let me go back up to thyroid real quick and then we'll be done and I'll open it up to questions. So this is another test that I looked at where I saw another example of somebody who had leptin resistance. That's another hormone where if our body has leptin resistance, our stomach could be text messaging our brain. Basically, leptin is released by the fat cells. The fat cells receives communication from the stomach that there's enough food. We've eaten enough food. But if that system isn't working properly or leptin is being released, but the brain isn't recognizing it, it could be released all day long, but that leptin is leave it, leave it, leave it, leave it. It's the leave it hormone, as in leave it, don't eat more food. So this one particular client I worked with was very leptin resistant. All we did was we fixed her system so her body was able to listen to the communication that her hormones were telling her brain, and her body was like, whoa, I'm eating like half as much because obviously my stomach and my fat cells are now communicating with my brain. There's less chemical interference. So it's like when you go to a concert and there's a bunch of people there and you're trying to send a text message and you're like, my text messages aren't going through. Well, that's really frustrating. That's what's happening when you have hormones that may be released, but there's interference and they can't get sent to the brain, so the body doesn't act on them. So this is another one where I found that this person was diabetic, didn't know it, and also had leptin resistance. So she was eating everything in sight, and then we fixed that. So that was another thing to be cognizant of in your body. Okay, last thing, insulin. This is if you have a lot of insulin issues in the body, and again, like I said, I bring this up because I see so many women having issues with this, and metabolic syndrome is the number one most common and number one growing disease now. In fact, 1 in 3 kids today are expected to have metabolic syndrome and diabetes, and injecting insulin in their stomach by the time they're in high school. It's a very, very serious topic because we are just eating crap, and carbohydrates aren't being shoveled into our cells for fuel. They're again being stored in our fat cells, causing high triglycerides and all of these other things. You have testosterone dominance in women, which could cause the PCOS, which is controllable, absolutely. Estrogen, high estrogen in men, which causes man boobs. And so you've got the whole host of issues that you've got with high estrogen in men. You might have more emotional guys, or guys who just can't lose weight. And this is where administering extra hormones, if you have issues with insulin and you just give your body extra hormones, in women, it's going to convert estrogen to testosterone and give you higher odds of ovarian cancer. In men, you can give them hormones, testosterone, but it will convert testosterone into estrogen, and then they get man boobs and waist a larger waistline. So these are a lot of issues that people don't think about before they just start throwing hormones at stuff. Same thing happens with estrogen. With all these hormone pills women are taking for birth control, we take the estrogen, and if we have insulin resistance, which 1 out of 2 of us is on our way to, a lot of us have it now, that estrogen gets converted to testosterone, and PCOS is one of the most rising conditions that I see in women. And that also, of course, leads to infertility and all sorts of other issues like rogue hairs and oily skin and hair falling out and can't lose weight and all sorts of other things. I see this a lot. So it clogs up the liver, causes higher cholesterol. We can't emulsify fats very well, make hormones, up and down neurotransmitters. So we're in a funky mood all the time. We're either anxious or depressed or both. Increased oxidative stress, which means a lot of bad guys, a lot of free radicals in the system, which damages the DNA, and it's not anti-aging because your body is diminishing and depreciating sooner. Increases your blood pressure. So I see a lot of people on blood pressure medication these days. That's also controllable through insulin balance, and then increased inflammation. Inflammation can look like fat. So if we're more inflamed, it makes us look like we're just more round and our face just looks more puffy like mine used to. So we want to calm inflammation in the body, get insulin levels balanced, and everything starts to operate on its own. So let's see, the last one thing. I went through a lot of thyroid stuff. So let me open up this one other thing here. I want you guys to see something. Again, on hormones. So progesterone is a very common, one of the very powerful hormones for women. Men also have it, but I want you to see a trend here. When you see symptoms, a lot of these issues are very similar with the symptoms that they present. So with deficiency of progesterone, you might see hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, foggy thinking, memory lapses, bone loss, incontinence, sleep disturbances, depressed. And in excess, when you have too much of it, which I very rarely see unless someone's taking exogenous hormones, sleepiness, breast swelling, decreased libido, mild depression, candida. Testosterone deficiency, low libido, vaginal dryness. So do you see that? Vaginal dryness and low libido was also on deficiency of progesterone. So there's so many of these symptoms that look very similar. With females, excessive body hair, I talked about that, loss of scalp, increased acne, voice change, oily skin, irritability. And then we have one more, which didn't pull up, which is estrogen dominance. I don't know why that didn't come up. Oh, it didn't show up on here. But estrogen dominance looks very, very similar to these two. So you've got all sorts of other issues and you're going, well, they all look the same. Well, how do we know? And the only way we know is to actually learn and to see the levels, the excess or on a blood test or salivary test is the most accurate. And then thyroid, this is something that you asked about earlier. If you do have lab results, this is something that you can look at on your own. These are important things to know for your own lab results. And a lot of doctors will say, oh, if you're above like 0.5, you're okay on TSH. These are optimum levels. So I'm getting into the lab stuff. I'm not going to get too deep into this right now, but I just want you guys to know that it doesn't have to be this way. If you have low TSH, then you're going to have a sluggish metabolism and you're going to hold on to fat until you correct that thyroid imbalance. So that's another hormone that's really important. So hopefully I didn't go too far over your head. I want to open it up to questions now. And the last thing I'll say is that estrogen dominance is something I see a lot in women who are using a lot of plastics, or they're doing things like the phthalates and the parabens and the pesticides. Phthalates and parabens are things in personal care products. You can download the app Skin Deep by Environmental Working Group. And that app will show you the dangerous levels of chemicals in our personal care products. So if it's a 1, it's good. If it's a 10, it's really dangerous. So we're covering ourselves with all this, vitamin D, really healthy vitamin D, sun ray exposure, which what I see that very, very commonly with a lot of women, really vitamin D deficient. And it's a very important hormone for metabolic functions in the body to lose weight. And we're blocking our vitamin D with all this stuff, all these chemicals we put in our skin, which adds even more insult to injury. So that's something that you can download on your phone for free. Skin Deep Environmental Working Group is the website, ewg.org. You can learn more about all these chemicals. That'll be in webinar number 2, where we're going to talk about chemicals, toxic load, and the extra work the liver has to bear in order to get this stuff out of the body, that when it doesn't release from the body, it becomes fat stores and you have this vicious cycle. So I want to open it up for questions now, because I know a lot of you guys on here have asked a lot of really good questions on the forum. And I want to give you guys the opportunity now. So if you guys have any questions, I want to open that up and I'll unmute you so you guys can ask any questions that you would like. So here we are. Okay, let me see if I can see anybody on here raising their hand, and then I'll unmute you. Okay, so it looks like nobody has their hand raised. You guys are being shy. Really? You've asked all the questions already? Okay, if we don't have any questions, then I'm going to close all this up. But I just want you guys to know that beyond the torture that you guys hear on all of these different forums, you should cut calories, you should do this, you should do that. These 10 systems of the body that we're talking about that are all listed here, this is a really important place to start to learn what system is failing. So you've got gastrointestinal, so common now. If you have gut issues, you're going to have excess weight. You're going to have excess toxins in the body. You're just not going to feel very good. You're not going to be breaking down the foods, the really healthy foods that you're eating. If you have liver and gallbladder issues, then you have a lot of congestion and you're not able to break down fats to make healthy hormones. If you have glucose issues, then we talked about that with insulin, you're not able to break down glucose and put it into the cells to be used for fuel, so it gets stored in fat instead. If you have adrenal issues, then you have a lot of fatigue issues, and you may have some hypothalamic fatigue up in the brain. So meditation will help you. Adding some supplements, things like adaptogens are really going to help. Adaptogens just help with the adrenals so they can cope with more stress. Adrenals make our sleep, sex, and stress hormones. So if those are shot, then a lot of those hormones are imbalanced. Thyroid, we talked about that. That's your metabolic maintenance there, and it's your engine. So if your thyroid is not functioning well, it's not going to burn all the fat, and you're going to have slow motility and constipation, and you're going to have a lot of toxins stored in the liver. That happened to me for 17 years, like I told you guys, until I turned that light on, and I was like, holy crap, my hands are finally warm again, and I'm able to burn the fat off easier. I have a ton of energy. My muscles got huger, bigger. You guys can't really see, but I'm kind of toned, but it's just been so much easier to gain muscle. So I'm like, okay, I'll do a photo shoot. I'll go be a fitness model again. Pituitary, that's another one. The pituitary talks to all these other organs. So there's the HPA axis, and the pituitary tells the adrenals what kind of hormones to release. So that could be very stress related as well. And then male, female hormones, we talked a lot about that. If you have estrogen dominance, can't really release fat. It's going to be very complicated. If you have progesterone, low progesterone, you're also going to have low cortisol, and you're just going to be super tired all the time. Cortisol we talked about too, but that's part of female hormones. If you have high cortisol, you're going to feel really tired and wired. You're going to have a lot of inflammation and pain in the body. And that's going to be also potentially insulin resistance. If you have low cortisol, you're just going to be really tired and you're not going to be burning fat very well. And you just feel like you can't even get to the gym. And then all the rest of this I'll just save until the next one. So the next one we're going to have the last 5. We're going to talk about toxicity. But if you guys have any questions about the form and you would like to email me personally, you guys know my email address. You know how to get a hold of me on Facebook. But otherwise, I will close it up now since it sounds like none of you guys have any questions. If you'd like to say anything else. Oh, there was one, Julie. I suffer from terrible constipation. It's usually pebble poop. Yeah, I've seen that a lot. You're not alone, sweetheart. And sometimes I'm not able to go every day. My father suffers from same, and my 11-year-old daughter has also had this her whole life. She takes Miralax every day, which barely helps. I know. I've been taking Metamucil daily, which helps some. What can I do for this? Okay, so this is definitely something where I would want to know from you, because this could be a number of different things, Julie. It could be that you're not getting enough healthy fats in your diet. You might not be getting enough healthy greens, which have a lot of fiber and a lot of cellulose in your body and your diet to get increased motility. There's also hydration. There's also making sure you have enough minerals. I do see, and this is something that I suffer from, I need like 800 milligrams of magnesium every single day. And the average American needs like 300. So I need a lot more. If I take magnesium, and this is before I corrected my thyroid issue and did the gallbladder flush, I needed extra magnesium in order to go poop the next day. And I was like, wow, I slept really well. And I had a great poop the next morning. And I was like, that was awesome. And it's like crazy when you get excited about poop, because you've been someone who suffered from, some of my clients call it rabbit poop, because it's these little tiny pebbles. And I've had other clients where I've done their stool tests, and of course I send them the kits, so I don't dig through the poop, but my clients would, take specimens of their poop, and they're like, my poop is so hard, it's like a rock. And it was a good exercise because they've just seen their poop and they're like, whatever. And to know that if it's that hard, you are very, very dehydrated and you have slow motility. In this case, there could be some damage to the thyroid. It also could be, because it sounds like it's skipping in generations, that you have a high level of toxicity as well. And so you may have some bacteria that's been passed down. You may have some metal, some mercury. You're going to definitely want to tune into the next podcast. I also have a radio show. You're going to want to tune in the next webinar, because I'm going to talk about toxicity. If you have chemical burden that does definitely get passed down, then you'll want to make sure that your liver is clean of those things and how to know what things you might have. The other thing that I would be cautious of is autoimmunity. So we talked about a lot about thyroid today. And if your thyroid is sluggish, then your constipation is going to be high, and you're going to have sluggish motility, and your bowel movements are going to be slow. It also could be DNA, and you have some methylation issues. That's a whole separate issue when we're talking about genetics. So if you have a methylation issue, that means that you have an impaired ability to detoxify bad guys, in other words, toxins from the liver, to get it out of the body. In that case, that's what it sounds potentially like it's more like, because it went from dad to daughter, right? And so in that case, there's tests out there that I could recommend to you, like 23andMe is one of them. We're going to want to check for something called the MTHFR gene, which really helps with one of the phases of detoxification, so that your body knows how to get it out. B vitamins are something that helps with that. So you could also, if you want to experiment with some of these things, B vitamins help with so many different things in the body. They're cofactors for a lot of different things in the body, including metabolism, including assisting hormones to work, also assisting us with energy levels. So if you're tired, instead of a coffee, try a B vitamin. I'll have a lot of people who are just really sensitive to B, digesting B, so they have to get B injections. That's when you know you have a gut issue, when you have to get vitamins injected because you have a very sensitive gut. There's also other types of supplements that you could take too, that I have to take every single day that help me to methylate. It's called methylation, and it's typically a folic acid thing. So we could talk separately about that, but that's what it sounds like. It could be a number of all of those things, but if it's genetics, I would definitely look at your body's ability to identify waste, know to get like a Pac-Man attached to it, and then the third phase is to flush it out of the body. So there's multiple processes involved with getting junk out of the body. And so many of us, they even say that 1 out of 2 of us has this methylation pathway issue, that the body can't recognize a toxin and get it out of the body. Or sometimes it could recognize it, but it just can't effectively escort the bad guy out the door. So That's a really good question. I'm glad that you asked that. So hopefully that gives you a lot of things to start with, Julie. You could do some experimentation, and then you could also email me with questions, because I have even a relative right now, and he goes once a week, and my relative, the parent of that relative, I can't really say everything right now, but the parent of that relative doesn't see it as an issue. And I'm like, your kid should not be pooping only once a week. They're going to grow up and they're going to have a massive gastrointestinal problem, if not gastrointestinal cancer, because they can't get the toxins out. So it is a serious matter, especially for kids. But you do want to make sure you have healthy poops, 2 pleasant poops a day, not too laborious. Otherwise, you're going to have hemorrhoids. That's very common too. And don't be embarrassed about all this stuff. If you want to ask me any questions, I swear I will not judge, because I've gone through it all. So, Julie, if that helps, please let me know. I really am happy that you asked that question. But Metamucil and all of these other Band-Aids are really going to cause more damage. I had one client on Metamucil for a long, long time. Those are just Band-Aids. Drinking coffee to go poop, that's another Band-Aid. So we really want to find out what the root cause is, so we don't have to support it with so many extraneous variables. With genetics, yeah, we're going to have to give you some extra support. But if there's just a function in the body that just needs boosting to restore health, then we'll just do that. But otherwise, if it's genetics, we have to support you otherwise. Okay. Hey, Diane, another question about Hashimoto's and diet. Should I get checked for gluten intolerance? Oh, yes, sister. Yes. I was working today with one of my clients who has Hashimoto's, and it's really funny to me because a lot of people want to say, oh, this whole gluten thing, it's just a fad. You know, gluten's not that bad for us. And I'm like, I don't really want to take this chance. I know when I have gluten, within like 1 or 2 hours, I'm like, literally, like maybe instead of having a Tylenol PM, I could just eat a big bowl of pasta with like a side of gluten. And I'm serious. I have a really bad reaction to it. I know I'm sensitive to it, but for people, yeah, you can do testing on it. The doctors are going to look at you like you're crazy too. But I do work with insurance if you want to look into that for, further. And it will tell us if you're gluten sensitive. It will also tell us if you have celiac. And that means that you should completely avoid it. And you have to be really strict. Gluten is not helping anyone today. It's the sandpaper to the lining of our intestines that makes our gut leaky and causes that autoimmune. And just for anybody, it causes an inflammatory response when food leaks into the bloodstream. It's not a very pleasant thing. It's just like hormones and dairy that also influences our hormone levels in the body. So we really want to get organic as possible, healthy as possible, gluten-free. I don't even like grains that much, especially for people who have Hashimoto's, especially for people who have autoimmune. And for you guys to know what Hashimoto's is it really is gluten looks just like the DNA structure of our thyroid. So if we eat gluten, we have a leaky gut, we already know that if you have an autoimmune condition, which 1 out of 10 Americans do, and it's on the rise to 2 out of 10, then that gluten leaks into the bloodstream and the body goes, bad guy, and it starts attacking the gluten. But then it doesn't stop, and it keeps looking, and it finds, oh, there's more gluten, which is the thyroid, because it looks the same to these antibodies. So all of a sudden our body's attacking itself, and then our metabolism slows because we've literally lost like all of our, a lot of our thyroid function. My brother also has autoimmune. So if, siblings do, you probably have it too. It gets passed down generationally. Once we pulled gluten out of his diet, we did his food sensitivity test, and he stopped eating those foods for the first time in his life. And I say this almost with tears in my eyes right now, because he's 33 now. And for the first time in his life, since he was 15 years old and having kidney issues, his kidney numbers stabilized. So his kidneys are no longer being attacked by antibodies, because at some point when you lose a kidney, what do? You have to do dialysis, and it's a nasty, nasty ride. So we got his body to stop attacking itself merely by removing the things that cause his body to go into this inflammatory response. And while we're in an inflammatory response, we have high hormone called cortisol, and our body just gets exhausted and everything slows down, including motility to go to the bathroom. So that's definitely something I would look into. Let me know if you want me to help you out with that. And I think that covers most of it. You guys asked a lot of really good questions. And I want to say that on this forum, there's a spectrum. There's people asking questions like, what is a carbohydrate? Then there's people who are going, what should I do about my Hashimoto's? And then there's all this stuff in the middle. I want you guys to know that I'm here for you all along the way. It could be super simple, it could be super complex, but I've used to work over here, you know, super simple, like just eat more greens, and that was my evolution as a nutritionist. And now I can really work and dig deep into some of our genetic mutations or conditions that we have that you don't need to have. You really don't. As long as a condition owns you instead of you owning the condition, fat loss is going to be the hardest thing for you to do. And you might feel really tired along the way because your body's always at war on the inside. And no amount of sleep is going to help. It will feel like I sleep 10 hours a day and it's still not enough. So I might as well just get 5. I don't want you to think like that. So let me know how you guys do with this. If I would be really interested to see what your results are. So if you want to scan the results and just email me and say, hey, what do I do? Then I'll answer some of your questions on the next webinar. Or even if you just want to email me personally, I'll help you out with that too. So if you want to look more about all this stuff on my website, it's dianekazer.com or Kazer Wellness. And then also make sure you're on my Facebook because I talk a lot of truths that people just aren't talking about because guess what? This and me educating you guys on this is not something I could profit on right now. This is me just helping you to empower yourself. I could sell you lies and tell you to take all these fat burning pills, but all it's going to do is tax your adrenals and steal from your future. I want to heal you from the inside out so that you restore function in the body and there's no more cheating and you don't feel like you're having to torture yourself anymore. So I'm not a money seeking person, but I am a health building person. And I really hope that all these things help you guys. And I'm really stoked about empowering moms because you guys are going to pass this on to your kids. So feeding kids gluten is also something that I wouldn't suggest. Okay, I think that we covered everything. If you guys have questions, you know how to get a hold of me. But otherwise, have a beautiful night and happy autumn. We are approaching Halloween. So namaste, everybody. Thank you guys for tuning in. We're